really didn't really get rolling until about the 1800s in Europe. And the innovators that grew out of that experience had a lot of resistance. As a matter of fact, Semmelweis was one of the first people who brought washing of the hands, if you can imagine that. That was a big deal then. And as a matter of fact, he met such resistance that he wound up committing suicide because they just would not accept the practice of washing hands. There have been other doctors. Lister is another. There's an excellent book, if you're interested in this. It's called Biography of Medicine, and there's a biography in there of 5 doctors who had medical breakthroughs, and it tells the story of what they went through to try to get acceptance in the medical community. And I think that we're kind of on the cusp of that now. What we're finding is we've got a system that's out of control with costs. We're paying more, and yet cancer and heart disease are rising. It doesn't make any sense. We're spending more for drugs, we're spending more for procedures. A lot of the procedures are quite invasive, and yet we find the disease repeating itself, like heart bypass, for instance. A heart bypass is good for about 10 years. Then they have to go back in and do it again. Of course, if they remove a prostate, it's gone, so that we don't have those issues. The men will understand that. These are some of the things that we're up against as individuals. And so the reason for this forum actually is to educate those that are interested in the resources that we have here in the Capital District and also that are available on the internet, which is actually global. The internet really was a breakthrough, and those that unfortunately don't have it, you can go to your public library, and every library has a computer. And if you're not literate and you don't know much about it, they're very helpful about walking you through the process. So you can get access quite easily. There are several books that I found helpful in my journey. One, of course, is Dr. Saul's, and that's Doctor Yourself, and that's available in the rear. And he also has a free website and a free newsletter, which is quite an endeavor in today's milieu. Most of the things we have to pay for. But that website and the newsletter is free. Also, there's an orthomolecular news service. It's very hard to get accurate information out to the general public because of the bias in the media regarding alternative therapies. There have been charlatans, there have been supplement salespeople, and they color alternative therapies in its translation, so there's resistance there. We can always, Kevin Trudeau is one of the guys right now making the rounds in the talk circuits promoting his book. And he's got a rather checkered background, so what they do, rather than listening to what's in the book, which is very good material, and stuff, those are treatments that come from around the world, therapies that are used all the time, proven, not double-blind studies that are called the gold standard, but of course that standard is the one that gave us Vioxx, that killed 60,000, and now some people are saying 150,000 people, and the FDA is now going to just put a black box like we have on a cigarette pack and allow that drug to come back on the market. What's happening is the studies that are done are not a lot of numbers. They do accomplish what the FDA requires, but it's not like having a large population taking a particular drug. The second thing that occurs that when you step from 1 to 2 drugs, now you've got 2 chemicals that are creating a chemical stew in your body. Nobody, absolutely nobody, can tell you with certainty what's going to be the reaction in your body. Only you will find that out. And you, in a sense, become the guinea pig. And a lot of these, they go unreported because the doctors don't even realize what's going on. The next thing that happens is now another pill is added to address those side effects. And the first thing you know, you'll have elderly people that are walking around and they've got these plastic boxes that have 12 and 24 compartments. And they're taking all of these pills. My brother Steve was an internist, and one of his specialties was working with the elderly. And he would take those people and get them down to about 2 pills. All the rest of it was cross-medication and dealing with side effects. And that's one of the things that, through education, I mean, we need to look at purchasing medical treatment the same way we look at purchasing an automobile or purchasing a house or going to shop for clothes. You know, we go to the sale rack and look first, and then we see what else is there. And that's kind of attitude I think we need to develop regarding medicine, because medicine is a business, and it's a very big business. And the reason it is because the pharmaceutical companies have made it that way. That's really what's driving everything. They are in the med schools, they are in the doctor's offices constantly, they are incentivizing the doctors to write script for the latest drug. And of course, when you first go, the drug is handed out, no charge. And then after that, you get into the payment process. And now what we're finding with insurance, insurance merely mirrors the financial deal that's going on. They have to make a profit in order to survive. But they reflect the costs that are driving the whole medical industry. And what we're finding is the trend line is sharply upward. If we continue on the path that we are presently on, we're going to find ourselves by 2008 almost 100% above what things were around 99. Now, there's not a single industry in the United States or anywhere in the world that can have double-digit increases each and every year, year after year, and still survive. Eventually, you price yourself out of the market because people can't afford your product. Not so with the medical industry. What we have there is something that everyone has to have in order to survive, and so it's almost like what the market will bear. And the newer drugs are the most expensive drugs, and now the insurance companies are saying, let's look at the effectiveness of these drugs in relation to what we had that just went generic. A generic drug is a drug that has lost its patent. So that what they do then is they sell that patent, they sell that formulation to other drug companies that make a business out of volume. They don't sell as much, or they sell more for less. And that's what a generic is. But the drug company's purpose is to establish new brands all of the time, because those are where the new patents are, and that's where the big money is. Now what's happening is the insurance companies are not willing to pay for these newer drugs because they're finding out that they really aren't any better, and sometimes they're actually worse than the generic drug, because the generic drug has a past history. People have been using it for a long time, and if there were adjustments that were needed in the formulation of that drug, they took care of that. The other thing is that they also know most, not all, most of the side effects. But again, I want to go back to the fact that that's why we had the tagline advertising this forum, that if you take more than an aspirin, you need to be here. And that's the reality of the situation, is that if you take more than an aspirin, you better become educated. And I have just an example of how a drug is promoted, to the general public, that is. This is a magazine ad, and if you go through any magazine, you will find probably about 10 to 15% of the advertising in the magazine is drug advertising. Now, this is the advertisement for the drug. It's very readable, very legible. You know what the brand name is. It jumps right out at you. So you know what they ask for when you go see your doctor. Why don't I take Crestor with all these benefits? You see, I believe in Europe, they don't allow a prescription drug to be marketed to the general public. Why? Because you have to have a prescription. Why would you have uneducated people demanding the doctor to give them a drug based on an advertisement that requires a prescription for that drug? Now, this is rather attractive, I would say. It's inviting, you know, it's blue background, it's kind of restful, you know, you certainly can see the brand, you know the brand immediately. Now we go to the back side of the page, okay? Who could read this? Number one, I think you'd have to have a magnifying glass. What's in here is all of the detrimental possibilities. Now, when you go through this magazine and you're reading it, you're turning the page, boom, all right, it's that, you know? Nobody's going to take the time to read that. But if you're taking that drug and you start to feel funny, you may want to go back and take a look at it. Now, the doctor will give you a sheet similar to this when he administers the drug, when he prescribes the drug. So it's not that the doctor is doing anything underhanded in this respect. I mean, he's giving you exactly the same material that he is being given by the drug dealer. So the question becomes, and there's one other thing I think we need to be really alert about, and I think this is where there's an old philosophy that if 10% of the population is involved in a certain movement, it can create a revolution. Just 10%. All of us in this room have a circle of influence. We have probably one or two very good friends who we reveal some things to that we don't even reveal to our brothers and sisters or parents. It's that kind of close relationship. But then there's a wider circle. And that usually amounts to about 20 people. And that would include your co-workers, people in your church, people that are involved in the hobbies that you're involved in, the school system, if you have children, the fire department, PTA, your neighbors. These are all people we know, we stay somewhat in touch with. So you have about 20 people that you can affect with the information that you have in your discussions, in your general discussions. One of the things we need to start talking about as individuals is the fact that the FDA is simply not functioning. When you have a situation like Vioxx occurring, and that many deaths occur, and if you do the reading on this, you will find that in the very initial studies, that there were deaths. Cholesterol is another issue. Cholesterol, people have heart attacks with good cholesterol. Now, why would that be the case if cholesterol was the issue? In so many cases, we're treating symptoms and we're managing disease. We're not eliminating it. And we're managing it because when we manage it, we take drugs. And drugs get us to a fairly comfortable level. But we're hooked. We're hooked. We talk about people taking marijuana, heroin, those kinds of things, and how terrible it is and the effects. And unfortunately, the way the system is set up with the FDA, there are so many people, there's a migration back and forth constantly from the drug industry to the FDA, and then back to the drug industry. Everyone is in alignment with each other in their thinking. The AMA still is treating integrative medicine for the most part as not researched sufficiently. Some of these treatments, the Chinese, for instance, with acupuncture, go back 2,000 years. I mean, how much more of a study do you need for a treatment that's effective? So what I'm going to close with is the fact that we need to be attentive, and we need to be talking with our legislatures to overhaul the FDA and the FTC so they go back and meet their original mission, which was to protect you and I, not to protect the drug companies. And they're so far afield from that that it's absolutely ridiculous. And we're just going to see, I just saw a printout day before yesterday on Lipitor. Lipitor is being sued because of the advertisements that they used. I mean, we've got a big problem because those are the things and the system that we have trusted, and we have placed our lives in these people's hands. We are not able to go to medical school. Years ago, the doctor had a little black bag and he had a stethoscope and he had a few pills in it and he made house calls. Not today. Not today. Today, you get a ream of tests that'd knock your hat off. And I know because we were in the hospital 3 times between the beginning of April and June with my wife with emphysema and breathing problems. And each time you go in, you better be attentive. And it's not a deliberate situation, but it's just that so few people have so many responsibilities that it's very difficult for them to give you the treatment that you need to have. And you are your own best advocate. I think it's really sad when the older people, who are the people that are engaging in the medical system most often, have no advocates. They're older people. They're in there by themselves, and that they're at the mercy of everybody. And if something goes haywire, they're not really lucid enough even to be able to convey what the issues are. You know, they don't feel right. They know when they feel okay. When you get to be elderly, everybody's got a little something that's not quite up to par. But when you get into a hospital, you expect and you trust that you're going to get the care that's going to send you back home, not to another location. And so I would just close by asking you to really pay attention and begin to watch what's going on with the FDA and the FTC, and we really need to get on the case of our legislators, because they're the ones that oversee those 2 agencies. They don't operate in a vacuum. There are committees in the House and the Senate that monitor their activities. And so it's really important, number one, to be your own best advocate. Find out what you have, and do you really have it, or do you have something else? And the second thing is, don't accept the first diagnosis. Do your own homework. And you're going to find out that you are going to live a much better, much healthier, much safer life. Thank you.
Could you introduce yourself?
We're going to do this backwards.
Does everybody know that was Ken Goey? And my name is Ed Daig. And welcome. Ken has asked me to be your MC today, to try to tie this together and make it coherent and try to make it somewhat fun. I am not here as an advocate. I am as objective, I guess, as I was on the news. I am disabled, as many of you know, but I don't disavow all of modern medicine. In fact, if I didn't inject Enbrel once a week, I don't think I'd be here. Nonetheless, I have long maintained that you must be your own doctor. In effect, you must know what you have, and you have to read about it, and you have to follow it, because your physician really can't. In my case, I have a fairly rare thing called ankylosing spondylitis. It's not reasonable to ask every physician I encounter to know all about it, so you have to carry the knowledge around and be able to tell him, if you do an EKG, you're going to get an odd reading because of this. don't overreact to it. At one point, I told the doctor, I've been reading that you get a sort of permanent TMJ with what I have. He says, yes, I just read that too. But you have to know that, and you have to follow your own disease and track it and keep track of what's going on. I'm not here to tell you to disavow modern medicine, certainly, but I have tried acupuncture. I was sent to an acupuncturist by a rheumatologist and found it quite useful. And there are some non-traditional medicines I have recommended for pain in the past that I won't go into again because it gets me in trouble, and I'm not here as an advocate. I'm here simply to tie this together and ask questions. I was hoping for a bigger audience and some skepticism from the audience because we will go to you for questions. I hope I don't have to be the house skeptic. I don't want to play that role today. So I'd like to see some skepticism from the audience and questions as well. But what we're here to tell you is that there are alternatives. They are certainly worth a look. That without question, nutrition plays a major role in what's going on with you. You have to keep an eye on that as well, and you have to continually monitor yourself. I, by the way, have also found meditation useful in dealing with pain. Most people don't know how to meditate. Maybe we can help you with that today as well, because we will be discussing that. But first, we're going to set the stage with the guy who wrote this book, which Ken has already pointed out to you and which is available in the back and which I've read, and it is interesting. It may be extreme in some places and perhaps not in others, but we're going to have he's a PhD. I'm going to get some problems here between PhDs and MDs. He's Dr. Andrew Saul. It's PhD. He has written a book called Doctor Yourself. He has practiced for some considerable time in upstate New York. Dr. Andrew Saul, come on up and tell us about your book. Welcome, yes. It says you're from upstate New York. Where?
Rochester.
Right, my condolences.
Yeah, it's
dying town.
Good morning. I'm the guy who wrote the book. What's in the book is what I learned, and it started pretty much when they handed me my newborn son and said, "Here, Dad." And I realized I was working without a net, that now book learning that I'd had plenty of in college and graduate school was not necessarily going to be enough to keep this child that was entrusted to me healthy and well. So reading and learning was not an option anymore. It wasn't an academic exercise. It was a matter of life and death. It was a matter of the wellness of my child, later children. My name is Andrew Saul. I'm contributing editor for the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine. Yes, I will define orthomolecular. It really means megavitamin. The Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine is the oldest and most respected journal in the field of high-dose vitamin therapy. It's been published continually since 1967. Interestingly, the National Library of Medicine's Medline and the Index Medicus refuses to index the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine, even though the National Library of Medicine is funded by your tax dollars. So researchers that want to get 38 years of information from the Journal of Orthomolecular Medicine have to go to a librarian and ask where the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature is. Y'all remember that when you were in school? Well, nowadays you're supposed to be able to go to the internet, and with a couple of strokes of the keys, you can bring up 40 million medical papers through this free tax-supported service called Medline. But this medical journal right here, that's peer-reviewed and has medical doctors and university professors as its editorial board, is being kept from the doctor you go to, the professor your children learn from at college, and you. We're going to change that. We're going to put the entire journal online. I've already begun work on that, and we're going to try to have it all online within the next few years. But 38 years of journal is a big project. Now, why is this important to you? First of all, I could go on and tell you more about problems we're having with modern medicine, but I think I'd be preaching to the choir. I think it's well known at this point that the American Medical Association has said that 106,000 people a year in America die due to properly prescribed pharmaceutical drugs taken as directed. These are not medical mistakes. These are anticipated collateral losses, just like planning out an attack in Vietnam, isn't it? If the Journal of American Medical Association admits to 106,000 deaths from drugs taken as directed and properly prescribed, we know the problem is worse. Carolyn Dean, a medical doctor, has written in her book that the actual figure of all medical deaths, including mistakes, surgery that's done without reason that results in a death, all the different reasons why people die from modern medicine, amounts to, in the United States, over 800,000 dead Americans a year, making it the #1 cause of death in this country. Now I'm going to tell you what to do about it. And this is the part that makes medicine and healthcare fun. I've been speaking for 30 years now, and I enjoy doing it. I once spoke to a garden club of very elderly men and women. Everybody had either a cane, a walker, or a Willie Nelson concert ticket in their hand. After my speech, I suggested, as I often do, that I'll hang around for some Q&A. And when I was done talking, they were so interested in learning about natural healing alternatives that they stormed the stage. They stole my lecture notes. That's why I put them on pink paper now. So if you make off with these, I'll follow you around and I'll get them back. They took everything that was up here. I felt like a rock star. Why? Because this is interesting information. This is information you can use. Let me tell you about Jim. Jim was psychotic. Jim was about 22 years old, and he was so schizophrenic and so dangerous that the state hospital kicked him out and sent him home to his parents. Oh, now there's a fine solution to a problem like that. Jim was a danger to his parents. When he got angry, he was abusive, and he would punch holes in the living room wall. Jim slept 1 hour a night. The rest of the night, he wandered the streets of the city. He would come home in the morning and confront his already stressed out parents. They brought Jim to see me on a good day, and no, I'm not a physician, but I've worked as a consultant for physicians for 3 decades now. They brought in Jim, and I suggested that he, and especially his parents, try Dr. Abram Hoffer's technique of using niacin in high doses, along with vitamin C in high doses, to treat the schizophrenia. They did. Jim was immediately given 3,000 milligrams of niacin a day and 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. The first night, he slept 18 hours. After that, every night, he slept 7 hours. The following Friday, he came downstairs and said to his father, "Good morning, Dad." This is what can happen when you use vitamins medically, if you take them in high enough doses. The problem with most folks' understanding of vitamin therapy is based on 2 fundamental myths. Myth number 1 is they're not effective. Well, if you check the medical literature, you will find tens of thousands of studies on high-dose vitamin therapy, which shows that vitamins are effective as a treatment. The second misconception people have is that, well, if they might be effective, they must therefore be, like a drug, dangerous. There must be something inherently dangerous about giving someone 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. There is not. There is no evidence in the medical literature, for instance, of a vitamin C-caused kidney stone. It's never happened. Find me the scientific study, show me good evidence that there's a kidney stone that's ever been caused by C. Don't tell me about high oxalate production and excretion. I know about that. Vitamin C blocks the formation of a calcium oxalate stone. That's one of its properties. There are many myths. Once we get rid of the myths, we're left with an intriguing thought. If high doses of vitamins work, how come our doctor is not using this today? One reason is very simple. Physicians go to medical school. They're medical doctors. They learn medicine. They practice medicine. That's why they have an MD. They do not go to megavitamin school. They do not learn about megavitamins. They do not practice megavitamin therapy, and they don't have the initials that would indicate it if such initials actually exist. And yet the safety and effectiveness of high-dose vitamin therapy goes back to the 1930s, when Dr. William Kaufman first used high doses of niacinamide, a form of niacin, to restore motion and freedom of movement to 100% in arthritics. Dr. Kaufman wrote a book in 1947. It was published. He wrote papers. They were published. They're all out there. They're all searchable. This is medical evidence by a qualified physician. Back in the 1930s, two cardiologists, Drs. Wilfred and Evan Shute, showed that high doses of vitamin E, as in Edward, were therapeutic for heart disease, all different types of cardiovascular disease. My father showed that when he took high doses of vitamin E and was able to get off the medication his doctor had him on for angina. He never had angina for the rest of his life. He never took medication again for the rest of his life. He did take vitamin E as an Edward. We know that vitamin C is an antiviral. We know this since the work of Dr. Jungblut back in 1936, when Jungblut showed that vitamin C kills polioviruses. Now, intriguingly, in the last 10 years, out in Wichita, Dr. Hugh Reardon, a medical doctor, has shown that high doses of vitamin C given intravenously are selectively toxic to cancer cells. You heard that right. High-dose vitamin C given by vein kills cancer cells and does not hurt normal cells. This has recently been confirmed, and there was a paper released just a few weeks ago in the Journal of the National Academy of Sciences. How come this news is not getting out? Now it is. I'm telling you, we're telling the media through our website, which is free, our newsletter, which is free, and the Orthomolecular Medicine News Service, which is free. You can sign up for all these things, and we'll be glad to include you with your email address. I used to bring my kids to lectures. It was a lot of fun when they were little. We raised them near vegetarian, and they had lots of vitamins. From the day they were born, they got high doses of vitamin C. From the day they were born, they got a multivitamin, and they were breastfed. Why would I give them high doses of C from the day they were born? What kind of a father are you, sir? Because I had read papers by Dr. Frederick Robert Quenner, a board-certified chest physician who treated pneumonia and also hepatitis and many other conditions with high doses of vitamin C, and published 20 papers in peer-reviewed medical journals before 1960. The information is out there. Worried about ulcers? You might like to know that cabbage juice was found to cure bleeding peptic ulcers, crater and all, providing pain relief in 3 days, cure within 7, by Dr. Garnet Cheney, a medical doctor who published in 1953. Now, don't you love those infomercials for juicers? By the way, I have no financial connection with any health product whatsoever. But those infomercials for juicers are actually, in the main, pretty much right. Of course, they don't tell you that any juicer will work, which is what I'll tell you. You get the one that you'll use. That's my advice to you. Take it out of the box and dust it off. That's the way to juice. Dr. Cheney was curing bleeding peptic ulcers in days with 4 glasses of fresh raw cabbage juice. He did this in a hospital setting, incidentally. His cure was 3 times quicker than the normal hospital therapy. But we worry, we still worry. Juice, high doses of vitamins. There simply must be some downside to using vitamins in high doses and being your own physician. There must be something dangerous about being a health homesteader, about taking responsibility for your own health. There must be something, we think. There's gotta be a trick. Well, if there is a danger in using high doses of vitamins, I ask you the most basic question in forensic science. Where are the bodies? How many people are killed by vitamins every year? In a recent paper we published in our journal, we addressed that. We look at the Association of Poison Control statistics for the United States, which comes out every 5 years and is published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine. Did you know there's not even one death from vitamins a year in the United States? Did you know that over half of all Americans take vitamins every day? That's 50 billion doses a year. This is so interesting that I had the honor of testifying before the Parliament of Canada on vitamin safety a little while ago. And it was a wonderful experience because no one knew that. And it is a great message that I bring to you. Where are the bodies? Not one death from vitamins a year in the United States. And yet, 100,000 to 800,000 deaths from medicine. Now, if that's not enough reason to take your little baby in your arms and say, hey, maybe I better learn a little bit more about this, maybe that's the reason why the grannies stormed the stage, because there is a need, there's a desire for this information. I raised my children all the way into college. They never once had an antibiotic. Not once, not one, not ever, not know how. Was I lucky? Did my kids just not get sick? Of course they got sick. You ever have a kid that didn't get sick? Little germ factories are always bringing home something from school. That's just the way they are. We simply treated it differently. When the children got sick, we gave them saturation levels of vitamin C. What's that? Well, it's indicated by bowel tolerance, and that's exactly what you think that means. Dr. Robert F. Cathcart, an orthopedic surgeon in California, who, by the way, is the inventor of the hip replacement that many people's parents, perhaps yourself, have already had installed. The Cathcart hip prosthesis is still used. Dr. Robert Cathcart talks about using oral doses of very large quantities of vitamin C, frequently divided doses, to get to bowel tolerance. This is the absolute saturation of the vitamin in your body. Now, if you look at conventional studies on this, you will hear, and unfortunately you will even hear from Andrew Weil, MD, who ought to know better, that the body can only hold 200 milligrams of vitamin C. Dr. Weil, who said this on the Today Show about 3 weeks ago, is wrong. Now, he's a wonderful person, he's a fine physician, and I followed him since he left medical school. But he's wrong on the vitamin C. First of all, the studies that he's quoting were done in such a way that they did not examine what would happen if you took 200 milligrams of vitamin C every 6 minutes. A single dose is a single dose. If you have a newborn infant, would you say, Mary, I shall feed you once a day? I don't think so. You feed that child on demand. Your body's a 24-hour concern. So the first thing we know is that if you take 200 milligrams of C once, of course, you're going to have low results from a low dose. The idea that you can excrete all of that is technically true if you're in good health, really good health. But you can hold 3 times that by dividing the dose. If you take bowel tolerance levels of vitamin C, you can hold even more. And if vitamin C is used intravenously, you can use more still. My daughter was 4 years old and she had a terrible cough, a really, really bad cough. We had a pediatrician. The child had been given a codeine cough medicine. It did not help. So while her mother was out bowling that day, I decided that Dr. Quenner's protocol for using high doses of vitamin C and Dr. Cathcart's protocol of bowel tolerance as a measure of saturation was worth a try. This little girl had coughed all night. She was not a happy camper. At 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C an hour, this 38-pound child was free of any cough whatsoever, and an hour later on the toilet. What we find is that the curative level of vitamin C as an antiviral, as an antibiotic, as an antipyretic, as an antihistamine, and as an antitoxin is right next to the saturation level. So the motto is, you take enough C to be symptom-free, whatever the amount might be. The sicker you are, the more you hold. A dry sponge holds more milk. So if you have a child, Dr. Frederick Robert Klenner says, give them their age in vitamin C every day, 1,000 milligrams per age of child per day. Actually, I found half of that worked with my kids. I'd give them 500 milligrams per year of age preventively. But the moment they get sick, the moment there's a sniffle, a cough, a sneeze, or a wheeze, saturation of vitamin C. And that varies with the person, it varies with your age, the sickness, it varies with circumstances. But the marker of saturation is always accurate. Whatever takes you to saturation is the amount for you on that day. Much more about this is in my book, Doctor Yourself, which just by coincidence, I am autographing here today for those interested. That is my vested interest. Let me tell you about Danny. Danny was 9. A little on the thin side. Danny had a problem in that he had an immune system that didn't work much. Every time he got a sniffle, his mother said, it went to something worse. Cold, bronchitis, pneumonia, meningitis, anything. He had no ability to fight an infection. She told me that whenever he got sick, they'd have to put him in the shower, turn on the shower, hot water, so he could breathe. That or have him die. They were interested in alternatives and skeptical, truly skeptical, that something like a vitamin could help when Children's Hospital couldn't. This child had frequent flyer miles. He'd been into the hospital so often. I simply told them what I told you. They were intrigued. They tried it. The mother called up and said, he's starting to have the symptom, what should I do? And I said, well, I'm not your physician, but I will tell you what I have done with my own children. You check with your doctor and make sure you do that in the proper way. I shared the information as I saw it, and she decided to try it. At 11,000 milligrams of vitamin C, she called back and said, he's fine. I can't believe it, he's fine. We didn't put him in the shower, he's fine, but he held 11,000 milligrams of C. How can this little kid hold 11,000? Well, my daughter was a lot littler and held twice that. Sometimes the dose of vitamin C goes up to 100 or even 200,000 milligrams a day. This therapy has been used since the 1940s. Where are the bodies? Not one fatality. You find one, show me. I've been asking this for 30 years. I've had almost one response. I'm a health nut. Well, why not? What kind of a nut should you be? Is there a better kind of nut to be than a health nut? Carl C. Pfeiffer, MD, said that there is a natural alternative for almost every drug therapy. Dr. Roger J. Williams, professor of chemistry and former president of the American Chemical Society, discoverer of a B vitamin, Dr. Roger J. Williams said, when in doubt, try nutrition first. And if you prefer a different take, let's not forget Benjamin Franklin, who said, the best doctor gives the least medicines. And for a little bit of biting Saturday morning criticism, so we know that our complaints are not new, we have the timeless words of Voltaire, who had no mercy for the medical profession and said, doctors are people who give drugs of which they know little into bodies of which they know less, for diseases of which they know nothing at all. I work with doctors all the time. I have a very high opinion of the medical profession. And we also know that you can't do what you don't know. You have to know it to share it. And right now, I think patients are leading the doctors. Here's an example. Sarah was 52, suicidally depressed. She sat in the corner in her dining room. She lived with her family, wouldn't talk to anyone. She wouldn't talk to anyone, no how. She also didn't want to eat. She wouldn't come to the dinner table. She just turned into the corner with her head down every day, all day. This is what the family told me. They asked me, under the care of their psychiatrist, would vitamins help? And I said what I always say, I'm not sure. but it might be worth a try since nothing else has helped. The safety measure is great. The risks are extremely small. So they started her on Dr. Abram Hoffer's protocol, which was double-blind, placebo-controlled tested in 1952. Dr. Hoffer, by the way, is editor-in-chief of the journal. He's my immediate supervisor. What a wonderful man. He's 88, and he can run rings around anybody in this room academically, and he can do it around my head sitting still. Dr. Hoffer is the one who showed in the beginning that niacin lowers cholesterol. Dr. Hoffer also showed that niacin is a very powerful antipsychotic, very powerful antidepressant. So they gave the lady niacin, and it took a lot more than 3,000 milligrams, which is the normal amount you'd give for obsessive compulsive disorder or routine mental problems. It took 11,000 milligrams of niacin a day for Sarah to be sitting at the dining room table and talking with her family and having a meal like nothing had ever happened. 11,000 milligrams of niacin, she was sitting at the table, eating lunch, talking to her family, she was fine. Went to the doctor, the psychiatrist said, "It's an awful lot of niacin, I really don't think she should be taking it, there might be some side effects with it." The family obediently and piously discontinued the niacin, and Sarah was back in the corner. This is only an anecdote. But if you want to look at the double-blind, placebo-controlled scientific studies on therapies like this, including niacin, they are in print, and I have 4,000 references at my website alone. In addition to that, we have many hundreds of them in my book. I had pneumonia once. Actually, I've had pneumonia 3 times. You're thinking, all right, how did Mr. Health get pneumonia? And the answer is I didn't follow my own advice. That's how. I got run down and I ate a lot of junk. So I got pneumonia. First time I got pneumonia, I went to a friend of mine who's an internist. I was so sick, my father took me, actually. He said, "You're going to the doctor." All right. You can't fight when you're half dead, right? So my friend, the internist, gave me an antibiotic. He said, "You have double viral pneumonia, here's an antibiotic." And I was just conscious enough to say, "Martin, antibiotics don't really work real well against viruses, do they?" He said, "No, it does absolutely nothing at all for the virus. This is just for a secondary infection in case you get one." I said, "Don't you have anything better?" He said, "No, 2 weeks of bed rest." I thought that was interesting. So the next time I got pneumonia, I thought, I can beat that. I can beat that. I've got Dr. Frederick Robert Quenner, a board-certified chest physician, who showed in his practice of 34 years that you can cure pneumonia with high doses of vitamin C in 72 hours. 48 if you give it intravenously. I'm not making this up. So I thought, I'll try it. I was playing Scrabble with a friend, and I lined up my 1,000 milligram vitamin C tablets on the table, and I took 2 of those 1,000 milligram tablets of vitamin C every 6 minutes by the clock. 2,000 milligrams of C every 6 minutes. Guess what? Do you think I got to saturation? Never got to saturation. That's how sick I was. But in 3 hours, my temperature came down 3 degrees, and my cough went away. That's pretty good for 3 hours. This is typical of what we can do. Let me tell you about June. June was an alcoholic. She had been everywhere. Her husband was a very fine surgeon in Rochester, New York. Wonderful man, brilliant surgeon. June had been everywhere for therapy. Nothing could help her. She was a wonderful woman, and she could not control her drinking. She and her husband came to see me, and I felt rather humbled by this because she'd been everywhere. But they had not heard about the protocol of Dr. Roger J. Williams using high doses of B-complex vitamins to treat alcoholism. Williams published this work in the 1950s, over 50 years ago. Well, it can't be any good if it's published over 50 years ago. I mean, look at the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution. They don't hold up. They're over 50 years. The Bible, that's a little old. And then you've got things like, the Magna Carta. Surely that is out of date. Most of English common law. Einstein's theory of relativity, that's over 50 years old. Come on, throw it out. We need newer research. Einstein was an old pot. But that's not true, of course. Dr. Williams found out that what works, works. Knowledge is timeless, especially health knowledge. So Williams found out, and he knew because he was an alcoholic himself, that if you took really high doses of B-complex vitamins, that you didn't drink. Now that, to me, sounded absurd. I have taught at the college level drug and alcohol use and abuse as part of a program for certified alcohol counselors in New York State. I've taught at 2 state prisons. No, not as an inmate. My captive audience, I have seen the seamy side. I've worked at the soup kitchens. I've been involved in clinical and editorial and public speaking work for 3 decades now. The idea, I thought, that you could take an alcoholic, because once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, this is doctrine and dogma of AA, could it really be helped by vitamins? So I said to June and her husband, here's what William said, take a whole lot of B-complex vitamins. Every 2 hours, take a B-complex supplement, plus vitamin C and L-glutamine. You got nothing to lose, it'll cost you 30 cents. She started taking B-complex vitamins every 2 hours, extra glutamine, about 3,000 to 4,000 milligrams, and quite a lot of vitamin C. Within weeks, I heard from her that she was stopped drinking. And what's most interesting is that she didn't want to drink. She wasn't forcing herself to not drink. She simply didn't want to drink anymore. The craving was gone. That's the beauty of orthomolecular therapy. It gets at the cause, not the symptom. Every year I got a Christmas card from June. Every year she told me she was not drinking, she was back in school, all these wonderful milestones in her life. She was really pulling her life together. One year I got a Christmas card that told me how great she was doing and that she was able to have a drink or two once in a while. Oh my God, I thought, we're gonna lose her for sure. And she said, no, I can have a drink or two and stop. And I thought to myself, that's not really what alcoholics do. She's not really an alcoholic. And then I thought, do I dare say the C word? Was she cured? I looked into this, and Dr. Abram Hoffer was a good friend of Bill W. Bill W., co-founder of AA. Did you know in the early years that AA recommended high doses of B vitamins to people in AA? That's how it started out. They don't do it anymore. I'm not sure why. It's such a great idea. Work the steps, give them vitamins. Hey, why not do it all? Is there something cosmically weird about giving high doses of B-complex? And taken as a group, the B-complex vitamins are incredibly safe. Where are the bodies? There's not 1 death per year. Talk about my friend Jim, the big trucker. This guy was massive. Jim had thrombophlebitis. His legs were a mess. He was on Coumadin. You all heard of Coumadin. And he had to take Coumadin to keep his blood thin. Without it, his risk of having real problems with the clots was off the scale. The doctor told him what kind of prothrombin clotting time he wanted. He wanted to make it a little longer. He took enough Coumadin to make it that length. That's the therapy. Coumadin, of course, is sodium warfarin, which is major ingredient in decon rat poison, but that doesn't really matter. Coumadin, widely prescribed drug, used by millions of people, does help. I would be remiss if I said it didn't. But you know what's interesting? Doctors Wilford and Evan Shute found out before Pearl Harbor started that high doses of vitamin E also reduced excess clotting. And if you take a lot of vitamin E as an Edward, you can increase your pro time, increase your prothrombin time. But unlike Coumadin, you can't increase it so far as would hurt you. So vitamin E in high doses has a Coumadin-like effect without a Coumadin-like side effect. Jim tried it, it worked. The doctor found out that he was taking vitamin E and said, if you take vitamin E and Coumadin together, your blood will be too thin. Jim was ready. He said, well, that means I don't need the Coumadin, right? Are you ready for the line? You're ready for the line? The doctor said, stop taking the vitamin E, it's interfering with the drug. I smile a little bit, not out of disrespect for anyone's pain or education, but because if a person like me can learn this, you can. This information is out there. It's out there for anyone who wants to be a health homesteader, who wants to take charge of their own life. There were 3 old men sitting around a table once in a restaurant, and they were old. They were talking about how they got to be so old. And one man, who was clearly ancient, said, I'll tell you the secret to long life. You eat nothing but alfalfa sprouts and bran, whole grains and fresh vegetable juices. You get to bed by 8 o'clock every night, stay faithful to your wife, and never touch a drop of whiskey. It's good advice. He was asked how old he was. He said, 99. Second man spoke, and he said, no, that's not it at all. So I'll tell you the secret to long life. You get up at 3:30 every morning, you run 20 miles, you live on goat's milk and raw sprouts. You skip lunch, you exercise for 3 hours before dinner, you get to bed at 6 o'clock, you never touch women, you never smoke, you never drink, you don't watch TV either. How old are you? 110. Third guy, so bent over and decrepit, his head didn't even clear the table. No, that's not it at all, he said. He said, you eat steak for breakfast, lobster for lunch, as much as you can for dinner, have a quart of bourbon before noon, smoke a carton of unfiltered Camels a day, carouse all night, and sleep all morning. Well, they were intrigued, and they said to him, well, how old are you? And from below the table, you heard, 23. I'm here to tell you that there's a way out. Vitamin C can replace antibiotics. It can replace antihistamines. It can replace antipyretics, things that lower fever. Vitamin C can replace antitoxins and antiviral drugs. Wonderful book out by a medical doctor who's a cardiologist. His name is Thomas Levy. He's on my review board. Tom Levy is also an attorney, so don't mess with him. Dr. Thomas Levy's book is called Vitamin C, Toxins, and Infectious Illnesses. It is a summary of 1,200 high-dose vitamin C papers that back up the statement I just made. Remember this, you can't drink a half a glass of orange juice and take a 1 a day. If you're gonna do it, you gotta do it right. Example, you can set up any experiment to fail. And I'm here to tell you that it's very easy to get a low-dose study of vitamins published in the medical literature because the low-dose studies always fail. And then you get that wonderful highline or the headline saying, vitamins don't help, blah, blah, blah. Or vitamins found to be in some way dangerous, like the absurd one that said that 500 milligrams of vitamin C a day could harm DNA. That is nonsense. And if you look into the study, you'll see why. There have been a lot of wonderful studies that have taught us many wonderful things. But when it comes to vitamins, you can set up an experiment to fail. You know how you do it? Give too little. Let's say I go into inner city New York or inner city LA, and I find homeless people, and I give them each a 25-cent piece. Every homeless person I see, I give them a quarter. I come back the next day, not much has changed. My conclusion, money won't help poverty. And with vitamins, it's the same way. The dose has to be high enough or it's not going to work. Now that's pretty obvious, isn't it? But remember this, the dose that works therapeutically is much, much higher than you ever thought. It is in grams, not milligrams. High doses. This is what I talk about in my Doctor Yourself book. This is what I have at my website, which is called dryourself.com. It is free. There is no advertising. There is no product there. I have hundreds of articles. It is peer-reviewed by physicians, has thousands of references, and we're now getting 35,000 hits a day. Remember that adding drugs to a sick body to try to cure it is like adding poison to a polluted lake to try to clean it. Not one cell in your body is made out of a drug. Think about that. Every cell in your body is made out of what you eat. Most illness can be approached, as Dr. Carl C. Pfeiffer said, by giving high doses of safe and effective natural substances, chief of which are the vitamins. Linus Pauling devoted the last 25 years of his life to high-dose vitamin C therapy. Why? Because, as one of our journal contributors, the late Dr. Emanuel Taraskin, professor of medicine at the University of Birmingham, said, "Sickness is the fastest growing, failing business in Western civilization." Ladies and gentlemen, there is no money in health. There is no money in prevention. The money is in sickness. That's when everybody gets paid. So if you're healthy, you are a real threat. I don't care. I've decided I'm going to buck the system, and I'm going to try, to the best of my ability, to doctor myself. Do I have a doctor? Of course I do. Haven't seen him in 12 years. Wouldn't know him if I met him on the street. He's there. If I really needed him, I would go. How about my children? Did they ever go to the doctor? No. They went to the school physician for their physicals. Did we have a pediatrician? Yes. Did we have a family doctor? Yes. Did we know their phone numbers? Yes. Did we have health insurance? Yes. Did we use it? No. Because it's not about not going to doctors, it's about not needing to go to doctors. It's about healthy kids, healthy grandma, healthy grandpa, healthy you, healthy me. So let's not focus too much on sickness. Let's remember that the real pony to back here is healthcare, which we don't have in this country unless you do it yourself. Plant a garden, grow your own food. If a clod like me can grow lettuce, anybody can. You know how you grow fresh organic lettuce? You scratch the ground, you buy 10-cent pack of seed at Walmart, you sprinkle it in, and you jump back. And you got lettuce. The same with tomatoes or beans or cucumbers. Grow some of your own food. You live in an apartment, put in a window box. Grow sprouts in your kitchen sink. I've got all that in my book. And how about vitamins? Do they cost a little money? Yeah. Don't you think it's strange in this country, though, that food stamps will buy you a box of donuts, but they won't buy you a bottle of multivitamins? Doesn't it seem like something's a little wrong with that logic? How come insurance companies will pay for Viagra, no offense, guys, but they won't pay for vitamin C therapy? Why is that? Doesn't that seem a little bit strange to you? We can beat that system, and we don't do a head-on attack. What we do is we change it one person at a time. You get healthy, and things start to change. When I gave a lecture, people would come up afterwards, if my kids were with me, and they'd go right to the kids. Do you really eat sprouts? Do you really drink a quart of carrot juice every day? No, they didn't. They drank 10 ounces of carrot juice a day. Do you really not go to the doctor? Do you really eat vegetarian? Are you really healthy all the time? And the children are wonderful. They'd be, yeah. And I just trot them out. It was a wonderful thing to do because it worked. I may be wrong. Everything I'm telling you may be nonsense. This may be a sneaky infomercial for a product I haven't divulged. Or there is a possibility that what I'm telling you is verifiably true. I challenge you, check for yourself. Look and see. Look and see what's been done for the last 65 years in megavitamin therapy and see what message it has for you. That's the message I have for you today. It may be a cloudy day, but from this time forward, the sun is out inside you. You take care of yourself, and you'll be a healthy beacon to everybody around. Thank you very much for letting me join you today.
Thank you. How do you know when you're saturated with vitamin C?
Oh, you know.
Oh, okay.
It's loose bowels.
Oh.
Actually, Linus Pauling said loose stools. It's not diarrhea. It's just a sign that you'll never need X-Lax again. There's a lovely thought to end my talk on.
Actually, I'm getting a picture of you playing Scrabble, trying to figure out how you knew you weren't saturated. Now I got it. Did you sleep last night? Andrew mentioned the absolute importance of sleep. It is the most fundamental thing we need, and if you're in pain, it's especially difficult to do. I actually had a great night. I went to bed at 8:45 and went to sleep, but that's kind of a miracle. Sleeping is always a problem when you're in pain, and if you have stress, it's all the more of a problem. And we're going to tell you how to deal with a number of specific things today, or make suggestions. We're not telling you how to deal with anything, but trying to give you some ideas about things you might want to look into, possibilities for your future that might help. We're going to look at pain and sleep as a difficulty, at fatigue, hormonal and adrenal problems. We're going to look at stress and meditation, spiritual mechanisms which may help you deal with stress and sleep and other things. We'll look at cultural medicine. We've already mentioned acupuncture and some other ancient, long-standing medical techniques from other cultures that we will also look at. We'll talk some about economics. I don't want to tell Ken, my experience in government is I'm not going to hold my breath until we get any sort of reform in the FDA. Are you kidding me? They're all going to jail in Washington. They don't have time for that. And finally, we're going to talk about some individual experiences with everything we've done as well. But let's start with sleep. It's absolutely essential, and it is so difficult to do at times. Can the panelists come up? I'd like to see Donnie Wilson, Pat Fennell, and Michael Campaign. Come on up. There's microphones on the chairs. Take a chair and attach a microphone. I'll tell you a little bit about these people, and this is the pain sleep panel. Michael Campaign is an MD who deals with this routinely. Ah, super. Pat Fennell is an innovator in the chronic illness and medical health field. She created the internationally recognized Fennell 4-phase treatment, which is FFPT. I'm waiting until they get their mics on. It's an approach for understanding and treating chronic syndromes. The model has been translated into several languages, used by clinicians, researchers, patients worldwide. She's the CEO of Albany Health Management Associates, which is in Latham, New York. Pat is there on the panel. Also on the panel, Donnie Wilson. What do I have on you, Donnie? Too many papers. I know I have something here for, Donnie Wilson, doctor, graduated from Bastyr University, is that? In Seattle, Washington, with a doctorate in naturopathic medicine and certificate in midwifery. Fulfilled a residency in general naturopathic, is that? Medicine at Bastyr Center for Natural Health in Seattle. Dr. Wilson, president of the New York Association of Naturopathic Physicians. And one more panelist here is a doctor who deals with this routinely. His name is Michael Campaign. Aha! Board certified internist, faculty of NYU Medical Center, member of the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, practiced integrative medicine for 20 years, part of the Center for Progressive Medicine in Albany and the Rhinebeck Health Center. Welcome to you all. Do you have presentations, or do you want to do this as kind of a Q&A and as a panel.
Why don't we start with Q&A?
All right. Well, let me start with each one of you, and let me work from this order over. What is your general experience with, Donnie, that's you first, Donnie Wilson, pain sleep? What's your expertise?
Let's see if this, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can I move that closer? All right.
Yep.
Well, let's see, you just started by introducing naturopathic medicine,
Yes.
which is, if you're not familiar with naturopathic medicine, I consider it an umbrella of natural therapies, all types of alternative and natural therapies. And my training is that I, originally have bachelor's degrees in general science and in nutrition, and then discovered naturopathic medicine when I was looking for a profession where I could practice medicine that emphasizes nutrition. Naturopathic medicine is something that's been around for over 100 years. It came first in New York State, so it's actually, really home in the United States is New York. It just turns out that it's much more popular on the West Coast. And I currently practice in Connecticut. I practice in Danbury, Connecticut, where I specialize in women's and children's health.
How does it apply to sleep? If I
And
came to you
sleep?
and said I have terrible trouble sleeping, what would you recommend then?
The way that I would say my specialty in regards to sleep is that, especially women with hormone transition. So I would say perimenopause and menopause is a common time where sleep is disrupted. I also, however, see children and women and men of all ages who have disruption in sleep, and usually I see it as a cause of stress. The cause is stress in our environment, and all the stress that we're under then disrupts people's sleep. And the way that it comes out in my practice is that I specialize a lot in neurotransmitter therapy, so I work a lot with assessing for neurotransmitters and balancing neurotransmitters naturally in the body in order to help people sleep better and have pain, as the other topic of this panel, have less pain.
Pain is often the reason people can't sleep. Same thing then. Neuropathic transmitters can help with pain as well.
Yeah.
What sort of additives, what sort of food additives or foodies are you talking about?
Well, neurotransmitters are probably the most familiar one people hear about all the time is serotonin. Even adrenaline or epinephrine acts as a neurotransmitter in the body. I guess a more simple description is just the messengers in our nervous system, the things that tell our nervous system what to do and when. And they're all built from amino acids, or the building blocks of proteins are amino acids. And amino acids get converted in the body to neurotransmitters. So you can use something as basic as an amino acid to affect the neurotransmitter levels in your body. And that's quite...
If you're dealing with a woman going through menopause, how do you feel about hormone replacement therapy?
That's a whole nother probably panel. I think the next one
It is a
gonna-
panel, but
yeah.
I'm kind of collecting opinions as we go. Is that
Sure.
something you would recommend or say stay away from?
I really feel like it's an individual choice. I think because of the research, we have to be very careful about hormone replacement therapy. I think that there's so many other options for the symptoms related to menopause that I recommend to women, let's start with diet and exercise. Let's start with other things that have been researched that don't have the risk factors that hormone replacement therapy has. And if we get to that point and we've tried, there's so many things to try after you've tried all of those things, and in certain cases, you're considering hormone replacement therapy, but my background is all in natural hormone replacement therapy and bioidentical hormones.
Is there bioidentical hormones that can help with menopause?
Oh yeah, that's exactly, if the conventional, hormone replacement therapy has been with synthetic hormones and or hormones that have been produced in a lab, and you can have hormones that are originally from a plant go into the lab and are made into hormones that look identical to the hormones our bodies make. And so the theory is that they would be less likely to cause side effects and potential risk factors because they look the same as the hormones that are produced in the body, but there's not enough research on them either. So that's why I still go back to all of the other natural therapies that are available. And I think the challenge right now in healthcare is educating people about all of
Right.
those other
There's
options.
probably not research with natural therapies because there's no money to be made in it by drug companies, so it's very hard to get the big research projects going on that as well.
You know, it's true. At the same time, it's amazing how much research there is. You know, you can go something as easy as going on PubMed on the internet, and you can find a huge amount of research on natural therapies. The NIH is really putting more and more attention towards research on natural therapies, and so it's the evidence is growing, and still it's true. There's not the same kind of money going into it as research on pharmaceuticals, for example.
Pat Fennell, tell us about the Fennell 4-phase treatment.
Well, I hate to say it, but well over 20 years ago, I was a hospice worker and here in Albany, and I was fortunate to be involved with hospice at that time when the modern hospice movement was re-emerging, and got an opportunity to work with some really wonderful local people like John Malecki, and then they brought in folks like Kubler-Ross and got exposed to Kubler-Ross's model. And in the context of being a hospice worker and doing a whole variety of things there, and I was also doing private practice and things like that, I started getting sent patients who were chronically ill that folks didn't really quite know what to do with. And a person could have been evaluated by a neurologist or another psych clinician or a primary care physician, and there really wasn't a framework for treating these people over time. So what came out of that for me was to start to develop a model of chronic illness, of what happens with folks who relapse and remit over the course of many years. I love the Kubler-Ross model, and I assume pretty much everybody here is familiar with the Kubler-Ross model, correct? I'm sorry, okay. Well, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was one of the founders of the modern hospice movement and did wonderful work with the dying, she developed this really terrific model that talked about what are the stages that we go through when we begin to die, or if someone close to us begins to die, in terms of acceptance and loss and rejection. I'm not going to get the sequence right. And this was a founding principle tenet for hospice work. But as I was working with chronically ill folks, there was, as elegant a model as that is, it had a few problems. In that, the problem with the Kubler-Ross model is that you had to die, that there was an end point. And when you're chronically ill, you go through these processes of relapse and remission. That's inherent in the process. So this started this whole journey for me about doing research, developing a chronic illness protocol, to how to work with people with lupus, MS, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, those diagnostic entities, and now, of course, things that are considered chronic like cancer, et cetera. How to help people, how to help their families, and how to work directly with the established medical community. I think having the experience of being a hospice worker, and especially back in those days, the attitude was a bit in the medical community was like, well, when we're done with the patients, you can have them, kind of thing. We've done everything we can do. Now you guys can kind of take a crack and try to be supportive, et cetera.
How heavily medicated in general were the patients you saw in hospice facilities?
At that time?
Yeah.
It would vary. I mean, I think one of the things that I learned there and I was exposed to there was that, on the one hand, to be very, very respectful of how you use medication. The folks were very sophisticated about how they put together pain cocktails for folks, as it was called at the time, and I may even still be. But at the same time, not to be afraid to use it, not to let people suffer. That was part of the hospice attitude, and I think continues to be. But out of that work, I began to develop a model that looked at not only the process of continuing to live with a chronic condition longitudinally over time, but also not only to look at the psychological pieces, but to look at the physical pieces. And by that, I don't mean just the medicalized body, what's your diagnosis, that sort of thing, but how do you move through space and time? Has your illness constricted you? Do you need to use a wheelchair? Do you use a cane? What can you eat? What can you tolerate? Can you lay down? Can you sleep? All those kinds of things. So the physical domain, in addition to the psychological domain, but also the social domain. Because one of the things that's really true for illness, and I don't know what to extent that we've been addressing it so far, but when somebody is diagnosed with an illness, you're not just diagnosing the individual, you're really impacting the whole family. However they define family, whether it's their immediate biological family or their friends or their workplace, including their clinicians. And we're the first generation of humanity to ever live this long. It's really fascinating, and we're the first generation to have the opportunity that if you were sick as a kid, and I was, that people would put the resources into you, that you could become a clinician. I mean, we're about to have the first generation of physicians, maybe probably the second generation, who were cancer kids. That was unheard of 30 years ago. So I got really fascinated with how do we work with people who have illness over time. JAMA had a really interesting statistic in 1995. I've been playing with this a lot lately and looking at the demographics here in Albany. That in 1995, it said half the US population had a chronic illness then, in 1995, and they weren't talking about psychological, they were talking about physical ones at that time. So as we age, and as we are the first generation of humanity to live this long, it's not going to be one chronic illness per customer. It's going to be several chronic illnesses per customer. So you could have depression, you could have osteoporosis, you could have a whole variety of things. So this really began to reinforce for me and the folks that work with me, how do we develop a model that looks at how people relapse and remit, have chronic conditions that they can work with either traditionally, alternatively, but they can have an integrated approach to their illness experience as opposed to an approach of I'm either sick or well, I'm either dead or alive. And our medical system, the whole basis, certainly what I've been trained in, was really a binary system that you were sick or well. So when you go to a clinician, a traditional clinician, you're probably going to get the same protocol of treatment every time you go in. If you're a diabetic and you're in crisis, the same series of things is probably going to happen, whether you're year 1, whether you're year 5, year 10, or year 15. Though your condition changes. If you show me somebody who has fibromyalgia or who has diabetes in year 1, you're going to see somebody who's very different psychologically and probably differently in year 10 or 15. So part of what we've been working very hard to do with our research colleagues, I work with the Centers for Disease Control, we have colleagues here in the United States, in Belgium, Australia, all over the world, where we're looking at how do we match intervention, whether it's an alternative intervention, whether it's a traditional Western intervention, to phase of disease. And we have 4 phases that we have established. Can I go on?
Yeah.
We have 4 phases of disease that we have really good science to support exists. The first is crisis, the second is stabilization, the third is resolution, and the fourth is integration. As a matter of fact, right now we're involved in a very interesting study at Cornell Medical in Manhattan, where we're looking at SPECT scans, brain scans, of patients from a variety of diseases, though my personal favorite right now is chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. We're looking at those diseases, and we're looking at their brain changes over time. And this is from a medical perspective, that's very sexy. You know, if we can look at how people change psychologically and how they change socially and look at anatomical brain changes.
Are you helping them accept what they have? Is that part of what you're doing? And the family of integrating everyone and helping them deal with?
And by that we can add the clinicians too,
Yeah.
helping them accept. Sometimes we get calls from clinicians, and we work a lot with clinicians and researchers as well as the families. And it's really hard for docs, for all of us, to work with patients who are sick over time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been trained to, you give people an intervention, they're supposed to get better and go home.
Right.
But they keep coming back. So from our perspective, we definitely work with the patients, with their employers, with their clinicians. We work with the whole system. We take a very systems approach with our team. And wherever the intervention is needed, we come in. We teach them how to interact with clinicians, whether they're alternative or traditional. We teach them how to consume these services over time because you're going to be doing that. So that's kind of an advocacy piece, and we really think of that as case management. There's nobody to case manage patients' cases anymore. If the average medical visit today in an HMO is 9 to 12 minutes, who has time to case manage a case?
Dr. Campaign, do you encounter these two in your work when you go into a hospice? I mean, do you need them? Or as a physician, do you look for them? Are they a part of the treatment, or do most physicians look away from them?
Well, I think it depends on the situation. I mean, most physicians, certainly, if they're intelligent and open, will use whatever resources they have.
Right.
I think from our perspective, what I find the biggest difference between integrative medicine and conventional medicine is not so much on the therapeutic side, but on the diagnostic side, in terms of chronic conditions. That it's true that for things like sleep and pain, you will have less side effects using passion flower or hydroxytryptophan for sleep than using drugs. But the real question is why you having insomnia. What's going on metabolically in the body? In fact, the drug response is really a direct result of that framework of looking at disease as discrete entities. And that's the biggest thing the pitch that I would make is that we already know, and medical science also knows, that that's not the way our bodies work. We're learning more and more. You look at Time magazine and they say heart disease is an inflammatory condition. Well, inflammation is something that affects the whole body. It doesn't just put on the brakes when it gets to the heart. It affects the joints, it affects the brain, it affects the heart, it affects the nervous system. It affects sleep, it affects pain. Free radicals, hormonal imbalance, toxicity. These are all processes that wash over our whole body. And if you look at the body and accept the conventional medical model, I have ulcerative colitis, then you fall into the trap of then having to come up with a safer therapy for that condition. But if you say, I have imbalances of dietary allergies and imbalanced intestinal flora and problems with gut permeability and hormonal imbalances and inflammation in my body in general, it's a very different answer that you come up with. And so pain and sleep is the same thing. Insomnia is a problem of arousal. It's an aroused state due to the pituitary and the adrenal axis. And if you look at it simply as a symptom, I mean, insomnia is a perfect example of naming a disease as a symptom.
Right.
And there's a whole medical armamentarium that was developed to treat insomnia. It's a perfect,
Well, you deal mostly with chronically ill people. How does your practice as an internist with integrated medicine differ from another internist? What's different when you...
The first difference is defining the illness. For example, when someone comes to see us with a chronic complex problem, we'll really spend about an hour and a half in the first visit. And I'm sure you do something very similar. And we have them fill out a 25-page questionnaire. So what we're really trying to do is get their story. And if someone comes in and they come in with a diagnosis and they say, I'm really looking for the alternative therapy for this diagnosis, and they're unwilling to step back and look at the questions of how they got where they are, what's going on physiologically, what degrees of toxicity or inflammation or allergy or hormonal imbalance is going on in their bodies, then they're not going to really fit with our model of treatment.
How do you make any money? And I'm not being facetious, but the capitation requirements of modern healthcare requires you not spend an hour and a half on an individual patient. How can you do that?
Like a lot of people in integrative medicine, we don't take a lot of insurance. We take a little bit of insurance. We break up our visits, so I'll see somebody 3 times to get their story sometimes. I'm doing it through insurance. It's tricky. You have to work around the system. We come up with diagnoses that are conventional diagnoses to satisfy the insurance companies, but I keep in my mind the fact that this person doesn't really have rheumatoid arthritis. They have Mary's condition, or they have Irving's condition. That's what they have. And my goal is to reconstruct the story and find out what the level of what we call total load of imbalances. It's kind of funny where we're trying to borrow the therapeutics from alternative medicine, the old healing systems, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, Native American medicine. but we're not borrowing the diagnostics. Those are balancing treatments. Those are philosophies that restore balance rather than attack disease. And really, that's what we're about. We're trying to look at the basic research, and it's all out there. The stuff that you were talking about, really the research is there in terms of issues, hormonal issues, inflammatory issues, free radical biology. Apply that to look at the individual in front of us and restore balance the same way the Chinese doctors do.
One of the themes of this day, I think, may be the resistance of traditional medicine. How much resistance do you get from your colleagues as internists to your approach?
I think I get a lot of resistance because that leap, away from that basic idea of we call a name it and blame it. It's very reassuring for a doctor to come up with a diagnosis.
Right.
It makes him think that this entity really exists. There really is such a thing as Crohn's disease. There really is such a thing as migraine, because it has a name and it's in the books, and you give a drug, and that's what you have. But if you take somebody off of wheat and their migraines go away, did they have migraine or did they have wheat allergy? So unless doctors have been sort of introduced to that concept and sort of walked slowly, and my impression is that it's very reassuring for doctors, especially doctors dealing with life-threatening illness, to have that name it and blame it construct. It's safer.
Oh, it's quicker to give a pill, too. I
Yes,
can
much
write you
quicker.
a script for this and goodbye.
If I could piggyback on
Yeah.
what might be reassuring that's starting to happen, we've been asked to be involved in this, and this has probably been your experience too, is that Western medicine is starting to reorganize along a more systems approach, i.e. NIH, National Institutes of Health right now, are starting to reorganize along the framework of functionality. So looking at the issues of inflammation as a whole, looking at the issues of fatigue as a whole, of sleep as a whole. The point being that these are functional areas, symptom areas that are generalizable, generic across disease. So whether the person has Crohn's, whether the person has fibromyalgia as a diagnostic entity, separate and apart from what the diagnostic entity is, that there are these functional areas where people are symptomatic. So whether it's arthritis, or whether it's diabetes, or whether it's lupus, the likelihood is in these functional areas, if you want to use that nomenclature, in these functional areas, you're going to be symptomatic if you're chronically ill. If you show me just about any chronically ill person that we're going to treat or do research on, I'm going to show you somebody, the likelihood is going to have some degree of pain. The likelihood is they're going to have fatigue, far and away. The likelihood is they're going to have, and so we're looking at those areas and starting to organize conferences around those areas and then inviting specialties in, so whether they're neurology, endocrinology, et cetera, rheumatology, rather than have it be disease specific, now have it look at the area of fatigue.
Aren't those specialties to them in themselves kind of sort of a block to you? Because the specialties define nice, neat areas, and one of the things you're talking about is that many of these ailments really transcend these areas.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
the specialists get to be
Well,
narrow-minded, perhaps.
It depends. 2 years ago, I think it was at the General Rheumatology Conference, the gentleman there said, fibromyalgia is not our camp. It's not for us. Then a year later, it was redefined. As far as the Centers for Disease Control, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome is the area of rheumatology, neurology, et cetera. So it's starting to be discussed, it's starting to break down, and there's more and more research being done in all of these disease areas. And now that the federal government, the media in general, the World Health Organization is looking so heavily at chronic disease, just in the past 5 years, 3 years even, if you look at on the cover of Newsweek, Time Magazine, et cetera, the focus is coronary disease, diabetes, arthritis, cancer. These are the concerns now of not only the national community, but the international community, and this is chronic disease. And there's tremendous overlap between them.
Donnie, how do you get paid? Because my impression would be that most health plans would not pay for your services, or do they?
My practice is as a cash-based practice, so I don't have insurance in my practice, although in some states, see, part of the issue in New York for naturopathic medicine is that there's not a license for the profession in New York. So that's what we're working on first. Is
Are other states licensing?
there's 14 other states, and that's part of the reason why while I live in New York, I drive to Connecticut to practice, is because there's a license in Connecticut, and in Connecticut, patients can come see me and have it covered by their insurance, but in New York State, that's still to come.
What about other countries? Are other countries more advanced than America in accepting this sort of integrated approach?
And I think, and this might be one thing I was thinking of from listening is that this would be a good place to emphasize just integration of medicine. The whole idea that, yes, these are all great ideas and great approaches, and the conventional model has great ideas and great approaches. We have to find a way for it all to work together, like you were mentioning with the specialists. It's very important to be able to refer someone to a specialist. I do it all the time. Refer them to a gastroenterologist for that specific interest. And at the same time, be able to find a way so that patients can benefit from all of those options. And I think in other countries and in Europe, my understanding, I don't have a lot of experience practicing overseas, but my understanding is that, especially in Europe, there is much more integration of natural therapies in this type of medicine.
All right, let me ask each of you for some quick tips. Because a lot of people in this room probably have trouble sleeping. Any hints that people do wrong? Simple little things that can...
If I can, one of the things, there's a Capital Region Sleep-Wake Center is a certified sleep center right here, and they do some really good work, and I'm part of that group as well. One of the first things that you can do is look at your sleep hygiene. Has anybody heard of that term, sleep hygiene? Okay, so here's some really simple things. Don't use overhead lights. At like 5 or 6 o'clock at night, turn off the overhead lights. When the brain sees that kind of light, it says, stay awake. Have a standard time. When we do quick sleep evals, separate, which is part of our chronic illness management, and we do quick sleep hygiene, we ask, what time do you put your head on the pillow at night? And if that's 11 o'clock, say, or you change that time every night, try to use a consistent time. Try to get up at a consistent time. Try to consolidate your sleep. Don't eat just before you go to bed. Obviously, don't eat just before you go to bed. Don't be on the computer just before you go to bed. The lights are very stimulating. So wind down your day, turn off the overhead lights.
Music?
For some folks, it's stimulating. For some folks, music and meditation tapes, any of those things can be very helpful. With folks with really serious health issues, and when we evaluate them, you need to separate out insomnia from apnea, from any number of things people can actually have. But assuming that there's been some workup about why they can't sleep in addition to pain, I like to encourage people to keep things by their bedside. So have a little water, have a radio or a little boom box or whatever you need, and stay tuned to NPR or whatever is going to help you keep yourself calm. Try to keep the physical stimulation down to a roar if you're really struggling with sleep. The bed is meant for sex and sleeping. Don't eat there. Don't do your work there. Try not to watch TV there. We try to keep those two things separate. We can go on and on with a series of tips. But one of the most important things I can always say to folks is turn off those overhead lights. And then when you're trying to consolidate your sleep, in the morning, when you do get up, get into the light, because it tells your brain to wake up and it helps to reorient your whole circadian rhythm. Anyway.
Anything you can take that's natural? There's the old glass of warm milk before bed. Does that really help? Is that...
Well, warm milk supposedly has tryptophan. There are more efficient ways to do that. Hydroxytryptophan is a precursor of serotonin, which is a precursor of melatonin. And the balance that she was referring to in terms of neurotransmitters, you can tell there are certain urine tests that can be done, get pictures of neurotransmitter balance and see if you can improve the inhibitory neurotransmitters, the serotonin and GABA, to try to get you to sleep more easily. But the real question that we always go back to is, why are the neurotransmitters out of whack in the first place? And usually with insomnia, it's a state of hyperarousal. And the adrenals and the pituitary are, due to stress, due to toxins or whatever, are hyperactive during the day. And so calming that axis down with phosphatidylserine or valerian or rhodiola
That's the I
during the
can't go to
day.
bed because I can't stop thinking problem.
Right, and valerian is particularly good for that, although it doesn't work the first night. You can take it for a week or so, and after taking it regularly for a week, then that racing mind insomnia will improve.
Stress, I would think, keeps people awake perhaps more than anything, even than pain, perhaps.
That's what I was going to recommend, is just building in some stress reduction into your day, whether that's exercise, whether it's meditation, finding something that's stress reducing, because as we're talking about, when there's, it's all about how your body responds to stress. In our world, there's abundance of stress, and how our bodies respond to that is that response is what keeps us awake.
One of the things we've noted clinically over time is people can have more anxiety at night when they wake up. They can have more of a stressful response. We call it the sticky thoughts. Somebody, maybe they go to sleep, maybe they stay asleep for 20 minutes, maybe they stay asleep for 2 hours, they wake up, and for some reason, we think of it colloquially, our worries always seem worse at night. And why do they seem worse at night? Is it because we're alone? Is it because the rest of the world is asleep? Well, part of that's because our brain chemistry is different at night. Our chemistry changes all the time, and when you enter into a sleep state or a partial sleep state, depending on what stage of sleep you're in, your chemistry is different. And when you're roused out of that, you're going to need different things to soothe you. And so when things do look better in the morning, there are some real literal biochemical reasons for that, in addition to the social ones.
Any questions? Way back. We can probably get a microphone to you. Yep.
I don't feel you've really addressed too much or talked about the pain and sleep. A lot of the things that we've been hearing have been in newspapers and even things like Prevention Magazine and some of the commonly read things. But the issue of pain and sleep isn't really addressed by some of the things that you've been talking about. Thank you.
Is there something in particular you're referring to?
Well, just the issue of, aside from being medicated, which, supposedly isn't the focus of a lot of this, the traditional medication, are there other things that one can do to address the issue of pain, preventing quality sleep, longevity of sleep?
If I may add to
Yes,
respond?
yeah.
Okay, we develop a sleep protocol for folks. We work with physicians, the practitioners, and look at what kind of either alternative or traditional medicinal interventions there can be. But in addition to that, we do the following. We ask you to keep a sleep log for us for 2 weeks. I want to understand exactly how you sleep, when you sleep, during the day, at night, the quality of your sleep, what time you put your head in the pillow, what time you take it up, how many times you get up during the night, to get up to pee, to get up to whatever. I would want to understand your sleep architecture. And understanding your sleep architecture, then we build a protocol with you. We look at the things that stimulate you, that trigger you. We give you different kinds of interventions that are soothing in addition to whatever that you can orally take. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But we work very actively with the patient in that regard.
There are some physical aids as well. I have a water pillow that helps enormously with the neck. There are some very good sleep aids that are physical in nature. But one of the problems we have is I found the water pillow. I told my rheumatologist, who now recommends it to everyone, but there's no essential clearinghouse.
Right.
There's no one, and that's part of the point you made, who's looking at this overall thing.
We attempt to act that way.
That's for you guys.
Because we're, as Albany Health Management, we act as a
Right.
clearinghouse of information
And yet-
for folks and coordination between services.
Which is absolutely essential, and yet healthcare won't pay for it.
They pay us.
They do pay you.
They do.
Excellent.
They pay us.
Questions? Yeah.
Also, the position that you sleep in has a lot to do with how good you sleep. Sleeping on your back is very important. Sleeping on your side is not that good. Sleeping on your stomach is not very good at all. Your body can't operate when all these organs are compressed.
Well, if I sleep on my back, I don't walk in the morning. It's side only. And if I sleep on my stomach, because my neck doesn't turn, I'm dead in the pillow. But you're right, and there's a lot of there's aids, there's positions.
The other thing is raising the headboard on the bed so that you're sleeping on a slight incline is also
Even,
helpful.
or temperature of the room can be a factor.
I mean, I think there's a whole level of, there's mechanical factors, and there are people like, who, like physical therapists, occupational therapists, who work on those issues as well. There are, neuromuscular factors, there are psychosocial factors. It needs to step back and try to sort out, why is this person having pain? Why are they having insomnia? The two are obviously related, but it's hard to come up with a general answer because, in fact, there are certain situations, as you saw here, where, a certain position might not be good for an individual, but they must be considered. You consider the mechanical factors as part of the problem.
That's part of the importance of the lengthy assessment that you do, because it's so idiosyncratic.
And I think it's also what we were talking about in terms of, when you're talking about someone who has pain issues and sleep issues and is on a lot of medications, this is not something where you take valerian and you're sleeping the next night. This is about a year-long process at least. This is where you're talking about the steps of intervention, the process that everybody goes through, and realizing that sleep is just the symptom, that there's something bigger underneath. There's a whole iceberg underneath the symptom of sleep or the symptom of pain. Just like, when I see people come into my office, I get asked this a lot by the students who come and work with me. Why do people come to my office? And it's usually that they can't sleep, that they have a lot of anxiety. Actually, the biggest reason I would say is some sort of disruption of the digestive tract. You've got heartburn or something. These are the kinds of things that make people not feel good enough that they're going to come in and seek help. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more, and we have to really understand that it's going to take a commitment of time and responsibility on the place of the patient, of each one of you, to have that responsibility to your health, to make a commitment on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis to make a difference in your sleep. It's not as easy as one thing you can take and have it fixed.
You mean you don't have a magic pill for us? Then get out of here. Panel, thank you very much. You've been most interesting, and in a sense we'll continue this with fatigue and other problems as well, but thank you.